Yes, thank you for the kind introduction and especially for inviting me here. It's an honor to speak to you. I also always think, like from my background in political philosophy, that the civil servants are in our society specifically one of the guardians of the common good and of the interest of the citizens in the political ecosystem. So I'm very happy to talk to you. I would like today to say something about the politics of AI. What does AI have to do with politics? What does AI have to do with power also? The starting point in philosophy of technology is that technology is not neutral, but is ethically and politically already laden, already has an political impact also from the moment that we develop it, from the moment that we use it. And this can be looked at from different angles. For me, artificial intelligence is a technology, of course, in a range of technologies, in fact, right? We have data, we have algorithms, models, and so on. But it's also a story. There's a lot that's being said today about artificial intelligence. A lot that can be also confusing for citizens because some of the stories are very negative stories, very dystopian stories. Other stories are about innovation, about how AI is going to contribute to the economy. This kind of stories that I would like to tell have to do with reflecting on how can we steer this technology in a more ethical and politically responsible direction. When it comes to AI in public administration, because I take it that this is a topic, of course, that is of your utmost concern, then of course AI can be seen as a tool to streamline bureaucracy, to standardize paperwork flows, to provide e-services to citizens. But it's also interesting to think about, like, yeah, what about the more political side of this? How can AI be used to predict and simulate, for example, in facial recognition technologies, in emergency services, so in all kinds of executive parts of public administration. What I think are some of the challenges for AI in public administration is that, first of all, there's a question like, what is AI and does it do? This is already something that I addressed with this technology and story. But also the challenge to employ the system in a human-centered and ethical way. And important for me today, thinking about AI and democracy, AI and power, is to say, like, well, it would be great if we can use it in a more participative and democratic way, yeah? So that we also, for example, involve all kind of stakeholders in discussions about how to use this technology in public administration, in society. Then there's, of course, also internal issues, and this will also interest some of you who are in management positions, of course, in this particular organization. How to do this in a cost-effective way, because, of course, AI also has costs. Also, who has the data management skills? What kind of people are needed to make this technology work in the organization? And then also, like, in what kind of culture does this technology fall, so to speak, right? I mean, do we have an open, transparent culture, a culture of sharing? Do we share data, for example? Do we share insights about how to use the technology? Or could there be problems? I mean, many, in Austria, for example, people tell me, yeah, there's not much communication between government administrations, and this sometimes is a problem for moving forward in this area. So I don't know how the situation is here, but this can also be a challenge. So this has to do with more organizational issues. And then, of course, you have this environment where AI is developed and used. It's continuously changing. If we think, for example, about ChatGPT and other large language models, we're talking about this only from November 2022, November last year, right? And in the meantime, a lot of things happen, and in the meantime, a lot of questions arise how to use this in an ethical and a good political way. So yeah, it's a fast-changing field, and in general, then all these choices with regard to the technology link to also broader political choices, and this is something I can say more about, because coming from this thinking about technology, I moved in a direction not only from ethics. I was part of, for example, the high-level expert group for the European Commission that was thinking about AI, how to regulate AI, but also towards a more political side. And in my academic work, I use political philosophy to think about AI and to address all kind of problems. So there's the ethical problems, for example, who is responsible, is there bias in the AI? But I like now to talk more about the political challenges, and then we get to themes such as democracy, such as freedom, such as justice, and of course, power. I first focused more on freedom, on liberty. At the moment, I'm writing about AI and democracy, so this could also be an interesting theme here. The rest of this talk, I would like to indicate some challenges that are political and that will also be relevant for public administration in the next years. One is AI and freedom. So we have AI that can, for example, be used for surveillance and law enforcement, and thereby reduce individual liberty, or at least being a threat to individual liberty. Now, taking away individual liberty can be justified in some cases, right? But the problem is that with this technology, it becomes more and more possible to put everyone of us under surveillance, right? So in a sense, we are today, the technology enables to treat every one of us as a potential criminal, for example. So is that something we want? What are the limits to that? But I'm also interested in another kind of freedom that is under threat, and that's one that has to do with your personal autonomy. As modern Enlightenment individuals, we like to decide ourselves about our beliefs. We like to make our own choices. We like to be master of our own lives. The problem is that this technology enables manipulation that goes under the radar of our rational choice self. And for example, if you buy things on Amazon, if you want to buy, for example, my book AI Ethics, then Amazon will say, well, people who bought AI Ethics also bought the political philosophy of AI. What is this? What's happening? This is a recommender algorithm, this AI, that is used to manipulate, to influence your behavior, to nudge you to buy this book in this sense. Now, this can be seen as a good way of nudging, but of course it can also be used in politics to influence elections and manipulate the beliefs, the political beliefs of people. Yeah, so this can be a problem. That being said, I think we should not always talk about the public sector, because private sector also uses this, and there are also dangers related to that. I think for the key challenge here with regard to freedom and public administration is that there is this balance that we need to make between, on the one hand, for the greater good, that it can be justified to have some kind of influencing of the behavior of citizens, right? For example, if you say like we need more sustainable and environmentally friendly behavior, then you can use AI and digital technologies to nudge people in that direction. On the other hand, there are the duties to respect individual autonomy and freedom, human rights, and so on. So this kind of balancing acts will have to be done by politicians, of course, but also to some extent in public administrations. Another interesting theme is justice, also related to equality. Bias is a well-recognized problem in AI, and that's of course also very relevant to all kind of things that government does, for example, in the legal sphere, deciding if people should go to prison or should get out of prison. Um, and there the problem is politically speaking, is what is bias? Why is it a problem? How can we justify a certain bias, if at all? And what can we do about it? Philosophically, the question is like, what is really a just society here? How should we treat citizens? And there's a lot of political philosophical work on this, and there are different views on justice. Some people say like we should have treat every citizen equally. Others say like, no, we should actually, disadvantaged groups should be treated, should receive special care and special attention, and we should do more for them. And this is related to a different view of justice that is more about groups, for example. So I think here the key challenge is that we have these different conceptions of justice and fairness, and that we need to talk about that. So we cannot only talk about the technology, we have to talk about also the ideas of justice. With regard to democracy, there is a danger of totalitarianism because it's so pervasive in our lives already, digital technologies in general, but also AI more and more, through search engines, through social media. There are these possibilities for manipulation, but also surveillance to a large extent. And for administrations and the executive side of government, that's also a challenge because, yeah, it can be used, for example, by social services to keep an eye on people, to their spending, their lives, in order to then make administrative decisions about whether someone, for example, gets social benefits. And yeah, on the one hand, from from one side, this is yeah, something that helps management of limited resources. On the other hand, there is this danger of totalitarianism, and here I'm influenced by Hannah Arendt, who saw that this bureaucratic management of people is very morally and politically problematic. And I think AI can contribute to that kind of problematic side also. So here the key challenge, the takeaway from this part is really that one has to balance effective administration on the one hand with the limited resources, and on the other hand make sure that we don't contribute also as administrations to this more totalitarian way of dealing with each other. Power is another concept that we use in political philosophy. Here, I already mentioned surveillance, but interestingly, what we have is that citizens themselves also quantify themselves, monitor themselves through apps, and of course this data can be used by private sector, but could also be used by public sector. And is that okay? And is it okay to try to change behavior in this way? Here the challenge, I think, is that we have on the one hand this quantification of the citizens for data-driven government as part of evidence-based government, but also the data-driven using the power of data and AI. But on the other hand, again, balancing this with treating citizens in the right way. And what's the right way? Well, respecting them as human beings, as autonomous beings, and so on. So here we have again an academically interesting tension, but a tension that also will be more and more there in practice in our political and administrative sphere. Last concept I want to say something about is knowledge, because through AI also the whole knowledge environment in our democracies is changing. If this manipulation is possible, for example, like in the Cambridge Analytica case, then how do we deal with that? And also, of course, misinformation and fake news. How do we deal with this if citizens are no longer sure which information is true, which information is not true? And I think this is a problem for our democracies. I think this is a threat to our democracies. So that will be a huge challenge to deal with that. So yeah, here for administrations, it means that if you're involved in the design of democratic processes, then how, for example, voting, what is the role of AI and digital technologies, and of course also in education, right? So how can we support democracy in education? What is needed? What kind of knowledge, for example, is needed by citizens for democracy? And this is really, I think, something that has to start from early on to give citizens the skills to participate, because otherwise you can have nice ideals of participative democracy, for example, but if you don't have the adults that can do this, that have the skills, then you have a problem. So you have to start early, I think, with this. So in this sense, like like departments of digital and always have to also, I think, talk to departments of education. So to conclude, I think I've given an overview of some of AI's political impacts, and I've indicated some ways this could affect dilemmas in a way, or tensions, balancing acts within administrations and within political environments. I think we can also then try to make more positive stories and say, like, okay, if these are the dangers, how are we going to do this in a positive way? What kind of better narratives can we tell? What kind of opportunities are there also to use AI, for example, in deliberative processes? So what can the AI researchers do? How can we better develop technology? What can educators do? But public sector can also do a lot, I think, by implementing ethical and political principles in the processes, in the use of AI. And I always think, coming back to my remark about the public good and the common good, I think that, that the public sector and public administration has a kind of special task here, because it can be reasonably expected in a democracy and in a kind of political environment to say that in a way the public sector has to give the example, right? So that being more ethical than the private sector, because if they don't do it, who is going to do it? So I think it's there, like from a democratic point of view, there's more need for justification towards citizens if you use AI in an ethical way. There's more need to give the example. So this puts, of course, some burden on you, but it also is a chance. It's an opportunity to contribute to a better society. This is how I would like to end. So I think we need, of course, more detail in how public administrations can do this. But I think to contribute to a better society with AI is the positive challenge and the positive narrative that we can all contribute to, both you from your side, but also from other sides in academia and education and so on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that very tidy exhibition of the possibilities and the challenges of AI.
Yes.
It is slightly different than the one Sam Altman was proposing in this week in its European tour. How do you feel about his narrative about the real challenges and the existential problems that AI provides?
Yeah, I think people like Sam Altman and Elon Musk also are very influenced by a very particular, almost sectarian group of thinkers who think about the long-term risks of AI, but in a very particular way. They have a kind of both utopian and dystopian ideas about super intelligence, about humans going to space, and so on. For me, this is very much distracting from the actual challenges we have for AI. And of course, what Altman is doing at the moment is trying to, like much of the big industry, to try to get out of regulation, to say like, no, just leave regulation to us. We self-regulate, and trying to get away with that. So that of course makes us think about bigger issues about about power, you know, who has the power in our society currently to decide about the shape of technology and its influence on our daily lives. And I think this kind of examples clearly show where the power lies at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, how many or how much of these challenges that you are studying have to do with the nature of the companies that are developing these technologies?
Yeah, I think these companies, first of all, they're located often at the moment in places like California and in the US. And that means also, you know, I really think technology is not only this material thing or this technical thing, but is also this story and is also a cultural kind of thing. And so I think because of this kind of geographical situation, we also inherit not only the raw technology, but also the culture that comes with it. So in this case, they try to export their libertarianism, which doesn't quite fit with the way we think in Europe about things. In Europe, we do think that we have to regulate. We do think that the public sector can and should play an important role in shaping how technology and what technology does in our society.
Well, I do think it's a happy coincidence that you were coming through the country at the same week, because he is in a kind of a diplomatic mission to convince administrations to start like an agency of sorts to control his own product, which is a funny proposition. And I mean, you started your conversation, your talk, saying that people here in this room are the guardians of the common good. And I think experience, history, even recent history tells us that maybe this development is way too important to leave it to companies like OpenAI, no? And to leave the regulation to the kind of agencies that he is proposing.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think by proposing some regulation himself or some agencies, he tries to, again, influence and control the way that regulation is done. And he also tries to monopolize the discussion, also in the media. And unfortunately, people like him get a lot of attention. So citizens start to think that, oh yeah, we should listen to these people because they don't only develop the technology, but also know about the future, know about how we should regulate that. And I think we should, as democracies, we should not accept that. It's not acceptable that only a small group of billionaires decides the technological future.
That would be my headline, by the way, if this was an interview. And so what can the people in this room do about this? Like, first, let me ask you, how successful do you think his diplomatic tour is going to be? Like, how open to the suggestion of creating this agency governments in the European Union are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult to see how much influence exactly it will have. I think the problem is because there's now the situation that you know, these companies develop the technology. People in Europe also feel a bit obliged to talk to him because we don't have things like OpenAI at the moment, right? Or if we have them, we don't properly market them, or we don't really sort of innovate in the way that they do. And this gives us, of course, like from if we then just have the free markets, you know, if we let the free market play out, this gives us a disadvantage because then we have to talk to him. But I think we can say like, no, we you know, I mean, of course, they're stakeholders in the whole process, and they should be. But I think we can also bring other values to the table, and also bring other narratives that are about people here and what we want and what kind of society that we think is important here in Europe, here in Catalonia and so on.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And it's also kind of paradoxical because if we were like, we cannot develop a technology like the one OpenAI is developing because it seems to me that it's breaking most of our regulations, no? In terms of copyright, in terms of data protection. So even if we wanted to, we shouldn't because it's totally misaligned with our, with not even our principles, but literally our rules.
Our rules. Yeah, so partly, I mean, of course, their rules can, legal rules can really play a role to safeguard, for example, human rights, to safeguard the rights of citizens. So I'm very positive about that. On the other hand, we also have to see how to adapt those rules to the new situation. So we have to talk about that. But generally, I think it's very good that we have this framework. And I think in Europe we should not try to be like try to be more, for example, more libertarian than him, or to be more in his direction. I think we can say like, well, what we do here is actually one of our strengths is ethical AI and ethical regulation. And I think many countries in the world are looking at Europe and seeing, for example, GDPR, the data protection regulation, and found inspiration for that. And so I think we can give the example of like doing things in a more ethical way. So I see it also as an opportunity, as something positive that we have that, rather than always seeing it as a break, you know, because there's a narrative that because we have all the regulation and we want to be ethical, that we cannot compete with them or China. But I think if we develop AI in an ethical way, we can really show the rest of the world that it can be done. That's at least what we should aim at.
And what efforts, because of course you are well aware of all the European Union concern about AI and potential of AI. So what efforts are being put in place in order to develop a more appropriate AI, a European AI? Do you think we have any chance of developing our own line of AI?
I think we have. The problem is that now there's still quite some confusion. The regulation hasn't been implemented yet, the AI Act. And I also think that, in terms of research, that there's still a way to go to really properly integrate ethics in innovation processes. So I think there both private and public sector can play a role in doing that. We can, I think from the public point of view, one could support more process towards certification, for example, standards. So I think it shouldn't always be like only laws that are used, but I think there's a lot of soft regulation, a lot of other methods that can be used for bringing ethics into the development and use of technology.
Other incentives, actually. Like one of the things that I think it's lacking in the European discourse about AI or even digital platforms or technology in general is the idea that we don't have the resources to invest, but or we don't have the luminaries or the vision or the kind of culture that is required for this. But then the history of the big technology companies in the States and in China are a history of immense public funding and public investment.
Yes.
And so maybe a parallel investment in terms of AI in Europe would be possible, and also a community-based approach that could involve all institutions like education, administration, research, etc. Shouldn't we have a big enough infrastructure and enough money to actually do something of note?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can, especially at the European level, but of course at all kind of levels, we can do public investment and in that way steer also the development of AI, right? So if we invest in ethical AI, then this will make a difference, I think. So we can do that, and I think it's good that you mentioned communities also, because I think if we want to do this in a democratic way, we should have input from all kind of sides, from also local communities, also from diverse groups. There's not always the same people who talk about politics, but that there's also people, for example, with migrant backgrounds, that they can also give their input and so on. So I think we can do this. So we need a combination, a kind of smart combination of top-down leadership on this, with visions of how to do this, and at the same time, taking on board what's already happening on the ground, Also, of course, in academia, for example, so there is more and more interest from engineers, from computer scientists. So I think it's that combination of top down and bottom up that can then effectively change things.
And so, to the people in this room,
Yes.
what advice would you give them in order to do both things? Because we're talking about like two paths here. The path of regulation, which even though important, and the AI, the European AI big regulation is about to like come to come to be after being approved by the parliament, like 2 weeks ago, and it seems competent enough. But of course, we're also in the 5th anniversary of the GDPR, which has proven to be appropriate and yet incompetent in terms of being implemented appropriately. And so I wonder if our efforts should be more on the side of development or on the side of regulation. I mean, I assume that it would be parallel. I'm pretty sure that if we regulate it properly, then those companies wouldn't have room in Europe because they're already breaking the law. But how do you see the path of resistance and maybe renaissance for technical Europe?
Yeah, great question. I think that that regulations should be seen in a little bit, so from that side should be seen as in a bit more experimental way, in a sense that we should see it as a tool that we use and then look what it actually does, right? Because it's very difficult in this particular area to see what it will actually, what kind of impact it will have on innovation in Europe. So it would be good to look what it does and then maybe fine-tune it afterwards. So I hope that there will be also at European level enough room for that. But given that there is already so much effort going into regulation, I from my side would now emphasize more the other things that need to be done. And there I think it's good if, for example, public administrations use the experience that there is already in involving citizens in decisions and in processes of implementation. Also in the technology and digital area, to say like, okay, if we're going to, not only for the implementation of regulation, but also for trying out, like, what can this technology do for us here in Catalonia, for local communities and so on, to involve people and use processes of participation and so on. And in that way increase the political legitimacy and the democratic character of technological change. Because if we don't do that, then there's only either the Altmans of this world, the Musks of this world, or the European bureaucracies, right? So I think we need also this more democratic aspect. And yeah, I think public administrations can play a huge role in that, and also governments at, for example, the Catalan level.
Well, it seems to me that this is the right city for attempting that. It is funny how, like, people think collaborative technology doesn't work when ChatGPT is an extremely collaborative tool. It's been made with all our content, even though it didn't get our permission. It's like, what, like forced collaboration, forced labor environment. But what shape do you think it would have, this kind of collaboration from citizens? Like, how do you imagine it to be?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a good point. We didn't give consent, right? And I don't think that simple models of consent, individual consent, will work anymore in today's world. So let's forget about that. I mean, we can have GDPR and so on, but philosophically speaking, I think our data go into it.
That's my second headline. Let's forget about consent.
Well, I wouldn't say forget about consent, but I think this shouldn't be the main point or the main issue. But what we should make sure is that then the benefits, given that the whole of society, with public money, also universities and so on, that the whole of society contributes to the knowledge production that is then used by these big companies. I think the benefits should also flow back to society, and this is what's not happening. So I think let's look at that bigger picture rather than saying like, oh yeah, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so didn't consent. So that is again about power and so on. And so for me, the challenge is really how can we make the development and use of technology more democratic, and yeah, at the level of cities and governments. Uh, yeah, I think we need to support these bottom-up processes also, and see how people also in different ways deal with this. I think there's also a lot of potential. I mean, I see in a city like Barcelona, where there's so many artists, where there's so many alternative lifestyles and so on, for talking to these people also, and see like what they come up with for how to deal with this new situation. I think we need all the creativity that there is in Barcelona and Catalonia, for example, to also flow into thinking about AI and the policy of AI.
How is it in Vienna, for instance? You're living in Vienna now,
Yes.
and Vienna is a peculiar city, no? Because it has like like it's a very traditional environment in terms of culture, but at the same time, like the technical development in Austria has had a bit of a push in the last 20 years, and so cities like Linz, like nearby cities like Linz, have institutions like Ars Electronica. The robotics departments at universities have very sophisticated. So how is Vienna approaching this problem as a city?
Yeah, I'm not in close contact there with the city council. I had more contact with the government via this Council for Robotics and Artificial Intelligence that advised the government on ethical and other issues with policy around AI and robotics. But I think Vienna is yeah, it's also a diverse city, but I would say that the general approach is maybe a little bit more top down. I think there are now efforts through, for example, through funding from the city level funding agencies to say, like, let's think about, for example, AI and general more digital technologies. There's also developments about digital humanism going on. That they're also like at the level of the city, because it's also collaborative between universities, and so I think there are good developments on the way. But I think the support from top down is could be much more for this kind of initiatives.
Right. So this is going to be my last question, because then we're gonna have questions from the audience. But I wanted to ask you: is there an exemplary city or administration or country that you can think of in terms of welcoming the technology, but also driving it properly for the common good?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I don't know of such a utopian city or utopian country. What I do see is of course differences in Europe between places like the Netherlands, for example, where there is perhaps going too much to one side, like embracing the technology and too little critical discussion, versus more countries like Germany and Austria, where there is a sort of humanistic pushback, but in a sort of more conservative way, in a way that doesn't think about the constructive stories we can do, the steering development of technology in a constructive way. So yeah, I think we need something in the middle there, that that we're of course open for changes and yeah, use also technology for good. But at the same time, keep this very also critical reflex always. So I think there we need something in the middle, and I don't know how Catalonia and Spain are in this regard. I think you have a better view on this, but generally that's what I think is a good direction.
Well, I agree with you that the narrative is definitely like a fundamental premise in this development, because I mean, of course, the Dutch look at technology as the tool that helped them build, I don't know, like a society on top of water,
Right.
I guess.
Exactly.
And Germans have a different relationship with it, no?
Yeah.
And so one has to wonder what the Spanish society feels
Yeah.
about technology. I wouldn't know how to say. All right, then I'm gonna open the floor to questions. So, is there anyone here with a? Do I have a mic? No. Who has a mic? Oh yes, the mic is coming.